Let's see. Now, okay. So welcome back. And the next part is going to be on entrepreneurship for researchers. So some of the same topics that have already been covered during Sajjad's part, some will go into a bit more depth. And we'll see the key topics will be primarily the definition of the problem, which Sajjad already touched on, the validation of this definition, so idea validation, and how to do that, what some of the most common issues are with this process, and then the definition of a minimum viable product, which is the personification, let's say, of the uh, value proposition. So I'll go ahead and share the screen. Let me know if there's any problem. I anticipate you saying it fully. Let's see. Okay, you should still be seeing the entire presentation fully. So let's start with the second part on entrepreneurship for researchers. First chapter, let's say, problem definition. So is there a problem? And this is the same slide that Sajjad has shown you already. So I'll go through it very, very quickly. It's all about solving a problem. The largest risk is making something nobody wants. As we get very focused on a solution, very focused on a technology, but don't think too much about whether it's actually solving a problem that exists. And there are so many assumptions that go into this later sentence that we'll go over it. It is often said there is a whole innovation valley of death to fall in. And what is the innovation valley of death? It is the bridge, actually the valley that separates what is interesting for public funding, so R&D and universities. So basically the development of new products, the development of new technologies, and what's actually needed where there's demand in the market for private funding, so for-profit companies. And in between, there is a problem of technology transfer to solve. There is a problem of problem-solution fit to solve. And it's not easy to solve. A lot of technologies, a lot of developments fall in this valley of death where they cannot find a problem to solve. And that's because usually it starts from the solution side, from an academic perspective. And as Sajjad is introduced, we should shift that and start from the problem that we aim to solve and then develop a product to solve that problem. But let's go over quickly some of the main differences that exist between an academic mindset and an industrial mindset, we could say entrepreneurial. In academia, moving slow is the standard. You already know this, I don't need to explain it to you. And going slowly is the day-to-day of an academic. We can all agree it's about slow, methodical work and about leaving no stone unturned. So studying deeply the problems, studying all influences to 100% of the capacity and controlling for every variable, as that is fundamental to not being, let's say, argued as incomplete, and about focusing on patterns and repeated behavior to identify laws and hypotheses. The entrepreneurial mindset is a little different in that it focuses on moving fast and iterating. That's also, according to Tim Hart, there are some pretty fundamental differences. Entrepreneurs are individuals that move fast from problem to problem, often seeing pivots as progress and not as unrecoverable setbacks that solve problems quickly, iterating towards solutions. And that focus on exceptions, on unique exploitable traits and niches in the market or in the problem, and aim to solve this. And so there is some distance between academic and entrepreneurial mindset. And what we can do is either directly collaborate with entrepreneurs as academics, so just get in touch with a department field with entrepreneurial mindset people such as Work Innovation or Technology Transfer Office of Polyme that will help us fill the gaps in the academic mindset with the entrepreneurial experience, or if we want to do it ourselves, might need some active efforts on our part. This is something that Sajjad already touched upon, so I'm not going to go over very deeply, but nowadays we are in a situation where there's no shortage of problems, of products or solutions, as ideas can be developed faster using platforms that cut out some of the most boring parts more easily and be distributed faster and more widely than ever before. There is an incredible amount of offer that meets an ever greater demand for innovation as we live in unprecedentedly comfortable times. We have better analytical tools to analyze the problems and devise solutions. We have less gatekeepers because we can go to market ourselves much faster and easier than ever before. This is particularly true in the case of digital products. They don't require expensive initial capital costs. So the problem is not on the solution side. Many of these solutions are not sustainable long term, and in general, sustainability is very, very hard to reach. Why is that the case? Usually, it's one of a few factors. The most important one, and the first one that Sajad mentioned, is that there is no demand, an habits barrier. The problem that your product, your idea solves isn't real in the first place, or the pain is not strong enough to trigger a switch. Secondly, we might find ourselves in a situation where not enough people share the same problem in a similar form that can be addressed in one solution. So more of a niche consultancy model. Or there is such a market, but the price that we estimated for this market, and so the cost to switch, are simply underestimated. So the people having that problem are not willing to pay or do not have the budget for your solution. Or your customers are willing to pay and your operation costs are above an acceptable market price. It is a market problem, so a financial problem, but there's also experience problems, barrier to entry. Maybe we underestimate the customer learning floor. The solution requires much more time, effort, or even in the case of market, financial investment than expected. So a misinterpreted barrier to entry. So basically, in short, the solution requires too much effort or resources for your customers to switch to it in order for it to be useful. Or maybe it becomes useful after a long time. Competition, you already know that we live in a globalized market where someone else might have solved the problem better or faster, or the alternatives are just as good. So underestimating the competition alternatives. Or behavioral economics. So there's simply no incentives. The necessary stakeholders or the people we are talking with are not incentivized to participate in the solutions. So what should we do? As Sajid introduced, moving from a product first approach to a customer and problem first approach. Now, this is why we should do that, because otherwise sustainability is up to reach. What do we talk about and how do we do it? This is through idea validation. So challenging the existing assumptions that we have regarding our product and our industry. Now, challenging the assumption is something that Sajid has also touched upon as something that's obvious. So using common sense to address the problem. And it's not as easy as it looks. What is the current solution? As there's always a current solution. There's always something that you're fighting against, and that includes doing nothing, because doing nothing usually is relatively cheap, depending on the case. Maybe cheaper than buying a product. In that case, there's no incentive to do it. Who also, imagine that you are right, there is a problem to solve. Who of those with the problem would be willing to switch to my solutions? Or better, who could be bothered to leave their current solution and adopt yours? These are all questions that are very fundamental, they are common sense, but they need to be made explicit, because not doing so might risk ignoring them. And they need to be validated, but you probably already know how as your scientists. So this quote may summarize that choosing not to document your assumptions does not mean that you are not making any. Instead, it means that you're failing to draw attention to the specific assumptions that informed your decision making. Basically, the foundations to your problem market hypothesis, problem solution hypothesis. These are some of the questions that we might want to ask ourselves, both regarding the customer, so the user, or the buyer, which are different people, as Sajid introduced, or regarding the competitors. And these are, again, just some examples, but they're not obvious. For example, how do they survive without you? How does the customer survive without you? That's very important to know, because it's the first the first thing they're going to tell you. And also questions that might be difficult to ask to competitors, but need an answer, such as why they don't do what they don't. So what they don't do, what they don't, or when they would copy you, or why haven't they already? These are all important questions. And validation is about asking those questions, finding the best possible data to answer those questions, and adjusting your assumptions based on the results. Just last week, I did as Remedy, we did an outreach event in Poligny with some high school kids to whom we presented the problem of remedy, so remediation for MSCMs, and I invited them at the end of the presentation, after having given them all of the data and information to best address the problem, to ask alternative questions. So not as engineers, but as still as engineers, but from a different point of view. So what problem are we actually solving? For whom? Who pays? And why do they pay? Because it costs more than not paying. Why is that? How will people use it? Assuming that people will use a product that we develop in the way we meant it to be used is an assumption that needs to be tested. I remember the example of the mosquito net given to distributed in some African communities to prevent the spread of malaria, which were afterwards used as fishing nets because they were great fishing nets. And obviously the need for food trumps the need for not catching malaria initially. Because so what they observed after distributing these nets is that a lot of people were using these nets not in the intended purpose because they had a different set of incentives, in that case, not starving, obviously, that led to them using the product in a different manner. And this incentive structure, the incentive, the behavioral economics, and the use of the product need to be predicted in advance because it's how it's going to play out. So it's better to try and predict how a product is going to be used. And how do we test these questions? Obviously, we're scientists, so let's be data-driven, test the assumptions, accept the results, love the problem, not the solution, and act upon the new information. This is an iterative process. Pivots will happen. You will find new information that you didn't expect by speaking with the people that actually have the problem. And this information needs not to be ignored, but needs to be included in the iterative process of finding a solution. Tools to make these assumptions explicit is already something that Sajid touched upon. This might be banal or obvious, such as this business model canvas on the right or value proposition canvas on the left, but they are important because making your assumptions explicit is of fundamental importance to not making mistakes in the product development stage. So these are some of the basic tools that you can use to make your assumptions explicit. In practice, what it's going to imply is that we start from a series of assumptions, an assumption stack, that includes all of the initial assumptions that could make your current model work, your current product, your current service, your current idea. And then you break them down, you break down this assumption stack as you iterate to the most essential foundational ones, the most important, the ones that make or break the idea. If these assumptions survive the test, then we can move on to the others. And we do this through data gathering, either direct, asking, or indirect. We may even want to use a repeatable methodology to do so. So a set interview text or a form that we send out, receive it back, improve it to improve our data gathering capabilities, such that it can be improved over time and gain more and more insight. So now that we have done the work of validation, these are some more examples of questions we might want to have answered before we start with the actual product development stage. And if you notice, none of these questions actually involved your solution. They're all about the problem, they're all about the customer and the incentive structures that drive their behavior. And as these are being answered, we will find that we'll have defined two things. The first is customer persona. This is something that Sajid already touched upon. These are fictional characters who represent either your real users, your ideal buyer, or your customer. So the target group. And the question, the data item that we should have very clear is we believe that target group. So this person has this problem. This is an example of a buyer persona. We'll go over very quickly. What could a customer persona profile include? It could depend on the tech and the purpose, or the product and the service. In general, we might want to include some basic information on their job title and industry, their age experience in the industry, because it might provide us information about their propensity to innovation and budget availability, as the innovative types in the company are the ones that are going to be your best friend when you try to provide an innovative solution to the customer. Whom they answer to. So what their incentive structure is. Do they have some KPI that they need to address? And so that's what is going to drive their behavior. And we have to be very careful about how we ask these questions, because the people that we ask are the ones that are going to define our data and then our assumptions. So we have to ask the right people. This is some more information that we may gather, the channels they use for information gathering, and that's what content one might be more receptive to. So whether to ask through websites or social media, maybe a mail newsletter, what their job responsibilities and KPIs are, what really matters to them, some of the key information they're interested in. Sajad also mentioned that during pitching, you really want to focus on the information that they're interested in. You have a very limited time, and you have to capture their attention. So this means what information can we quickly provide that will capture their attention in the limited time we likely have available in our early interactions. What are the tools required? So the key features they might be interested in, and the biggest challenges. And this is probably the most important to us. What's the problem they have? The problem that they're going to be thinking about as they drive home from work. And acing these questions is really, really important. What are some tools that we can use to create some customer persona? Either direct interviews, get in touch with the people and hope that some of them reply, which is definitely not always the case. So I aim for large numbers of people. Or the email drop landing page, which is something that can be used to rapidly gain contact and data on to sample the interest in a specific idea. We'll go into more of this later. So first thing we define iteratively questioning our assumptions is the customer persona. The second thing is the key benefits. So the actual problem you're solving, where you're actually adding value to the user experience. So what is the problem they're answering? What is the pain? And what value are you providing by solving that pain? So benefits versus features, we've already gone over this with Sajad. Basically, benefits tell someone how a product will affect them, whereas features tell someone what the product does and what they're interested in solving a problem they have. So in the benefits, same quote as before. People don't want a quarter-inch drill; they want a quarter-inch hole. So you'll understand that if we put it into practice, then a venture that's designing a new drill head has to consider, I don't know, tape or nails or hooks as potential competitors because they can solve the same pain. They can provide the same benefit. Working through this iteratively will lead you to creating a value proposition, a statement that clearly identifies what the benefits a company's product and services will deliver to its customers, and therefore lead to a practical implementation of this value proposition into an MVP or minimum valuable product, which combines the information that you've gathered, the assumptions that you're answered and validated, and you will need to have data that supports these validated assumptions into a marketable product that answers these basic benefits in the most efficient way possible. So, value proposition MVP. MVP, or minimum value product, is the version of a new product that allows our team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. So basically, it's another data gathering tool. It's obviously a finished product, but it should be reduced to the minimum and answer the most fundamental features that your customers ask for, that your user asks for. The MVP can serve as a data-gathering tool. It should test the riskiest assumptions and should change over time if necessary. And usually the biggest risk is not tech, the features, so the features that your product have, but rather the benefits it answers, the market, how people are actually going to use it, what the incentives that drive their behavior are. There are many kinds of MVP depending on the industry, depending on the product or service that you use. Each of these examples, such as landing page, demo video, crowdfunding, have an example that has worked alongside the thousands that haven't. For example, landing page as Buffer, the example I did before, who launched the product before the product was ready, just to sample, in a sense that they said, these are the benefits that we provide, sign up for a plan. People were clicking on it and the product wasn't actually there, would say, sorry, you caught us before we are ready, but give us our email and we can get in touch as soon as the product is ready. And this allows you to sample the interest of people that would actually have been interested in buying it, which is one of the strongest demonstrators of interest there is. Earlier on, I mentioned that impact is as strong as the actual thing you're sampling. So time and money, resources, much more valuable than just interest. In that case, if they were willing to pay for it, that's a very good demonstration of interest. Demo videos Dropbox, who launched with the demo video. Crowdfunding, I'm sure you have many examples in mind. For Indigo or Kickstarter. Piecemeal as Groupon, I believe. Piecemeal consists in grabbing different features, putting them together and offering it as a complete package. Wizard of Oz, I believe a few online stores used the Wizard of Oz MVP type early on, such as Zappos, a shoe retailer. Was Concierge MVP has been used by other food prep startups, for example, like Food on the Table. But without going into details, it's not important. The point is that there are a ton of different varieties. The understanding of an MVP is extremely important because this is the equivalent with the product service features of our breaking down or the assumption stack to the most fundamental ones. So you break down the features into the most essential ones and you generate a product based on it, the MVP. And as you can see in this graph, so this is what I showed before with the assumptions, but in this case, it's the MVP. You break down the features that you want to provide to only the most essential and foundational ones. You iterate them, and if you receive good feedback, then you can add the rest later. But first, you start with the most streamlined version that can allow you to gather the most data possible. And this is very important. Lean validation, so the gathering of data with the least amount of effort possible and the least amount of wasted resources. So in short, the best way to validate features is to get yours and your users' hands dirty by testing the product surfaces, gathering real feedback, the most viable kind of feedback, and adjusting iteratively. Because obviously, getting your customers to use the product and giving you back feedback, positive or negative, is the best kind of feedback that is. It can lead to major improvements and pivots. And in order to waste the least amount of resources doing so, an essential streamlined version of the MVP is the best version of the MVP you can get, also called, again, lean validation. And that's how you find a specific validated problem and address it. Here are some more useful links, which I will leave afterwards. And an exercise/Q&A is to write down a draft of a user persona for your technology, focusing on the channels to engage them through. And the channels are the media or the ways that you're going to get in touch with them, and trying to understand what their challenges would be. So thinking of a few questions you might want to ask. Also, think of the most suitable form of MVP or first contact with the user for your technology. So, which, depending on what the product or service you're developing is, whether it's a software or code or a physical product, what would be the most suitable way to first approach the customer and get that data from them. that is it for this second session on entrepreneurship for researchers. So I will stop sharing the screen now, and I will also stop the recording. So thank you for the attention, and see you for the next one.